Jacksonville, the child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. Poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The title of our episode is The Week That Was, on the 8th of February 2020. It's been a very interesting week. The impeachment of DJ Trump has ended. It ended with his acquittal. And we have Uncle Karl Rove talking about the Democratic Party and Iowa. Now, as far as Iowa is concerned, we have two presentations that come out in the next day or so about Iowa. One is tentatively titled A Mess Called Iowa, and the other involves voting and voting apps. Will be on our other broadcasts, the Open Source Report. We'll talk about the company called Shadow Inc. That'll also be on the political side, Boston Red. But we'll go into actually what happened with the app and how voting apps and voting online can be made more trustworthy by using open source. We'll talk about open source voting and some examples of it, and what is going on in voting, in particular in the states. Now the quote-unquote gold standard, platinum standard, silver standard, or no standard, is a verifiable paper trail. We're back to literally using ink and paper, well, at least paper. Nonetheless, where there is a record of one's voting. Thus, in Iowa, they filled out placards. They can't call them ballots there because of New Hampshire. But nonetheless, that put the number of people, we'll assume there, and the number of people on the first choice for each candidate, and the second choice, etc., that was recorded. And the photos were taken by a smartphone, I assume most of the time, and transmitted to a central headquarters. Now, as a backup, they actually had where you could call in to the Democratic Party headquarters, but it was not adequately staffed. And the application itself was dodgy. It was by Shadow, and Shadow evidently came out of some associates of Hillary the Monster Clinton. So we'll kind of leave that at where it was there. The candidates have since moved on to New Hampshire. We'll talk about that. There was a debate on Friday night there in Manchester. The 7 candidates were on the stage. They ranged from Bernie Sanders to Joe Lunchbox Biden, Mayor Petey, former Mayor Petey as he's called, He's locked into a tight contest with Bernie Sanders. We'll talk about some polling here. And we had Tom Steyer there, Elizabeth Warren there, and Amy Klobuchar. Now, all of these people, with the exception of Amy Klobuchar and Little Petey, were in their 70s. Tom Steyer is 70 years old. And Bernie is 78. And Joe Lunchbox Biden is in that vicinity, 77 to 78. They're all in their 70s. Whereas Amy is, I believe, 59 years old. And Little Petey is either 38 or 39 to round out the field in age groups. They debated on experience. Obviously, Joe Lunchbox Biden has been vice president for 8 years. He has experience in foreign policy and domestic policy. In the Senate, he was chair of the Judiciary Committee. So thus, he has the experience there. Amy Klobuchar has been in the Senate. This is her third term, so she has legislative experience. She has administrative experience as being a state's attorney. Period. And a daughter of the working class. So that separates people out. Bernie Sanders has been a politician for many, many years. He was in the House of Representatives, but he started out in Chicago demonstrating against racial segregation in the city of Chicago and was arrested. There were photos of Bernie being dragged off by the Chicago PD. He's from Brooklyn, and he later moved to New Hampshire, and he made his livelihood there writing polemics, basically speaking there. He also did some film work, and being a son of the working class, a son of a Jewish immigrant, he is literally the direct son of one. They didn't have a lot of money when he grew up there, so and he came from the working class, and with Amy Klobuchar. And then you have Joe Biden. He didn't have a lot of money. I think his father was a sales type. Period there. Tom Steyer, a billionaire. And then you have, by inference, who was not there, Mr. Bloomberg, who is also a billionaire. He's in this presidential contest. He'll appear later in the presidential sweepstakes on the Super Tuesday, as it's called, March 3rd. And you have Pete Buttigieg. He's out of South Bend, Indiana. He went to and graduate, was a Rhodes Scholar, which incidentally is a political appointment. And he spent several months as an intelligence officer in Afghanistan. And he uses that to meet, quote-unquote, with veterans. He's an opportunist, in our opinion. And not only that, Bernie is correct. He gets a lot of his money from big donors. He's known as the man from Facebook, and by some as CIA Pete, because of the intelligence office there. So thus, you have the look of the candidates who were in the debate. They were debating about many things, including experience, how their contributions flowed in. And also, there was a debate about direction. In other words, Mayor Petey was talking about a new start, a new politic. And some commentators have compared that to Barack Obama. Well, Barack Obama was, as the late great Jerry Pippin called it, an Eisenhower Republican, which is a different situation. Today, he obviously was labeled a liberal or a progressive, no doubt about that. Whereas Little Petey has shaped his campaign as what we would call a Clinton Democrat, a centralist type campaign, more so there. And his rhetoric is based upon that, period. Now, in a state like New Hampshire, one has to understand that New Hampshire is a state that is not a liberal bastion. It is at best a conservative state, and you have moderates in that state. That is the appeal, more so, of Little Petey in New Hampshire, and he has been rising in the polls, period. Bernie Sanders, of course, being a New Englander, people in New Hampshire like to vote, kicked Hillary Monster Clinton in the rear in New Hampshire the last time around. But now the field is much more crowded, I shouldn't say clouded also, that you have these centrist candidates in there that appeal to those people, and also the Democratic Party primary there, people that are non-aligned or independents can vote in that primary. And I believe in the last presidential primary they had, around 40% of the votes were there. And those are some of the people that Little Petey has targeted, and people around the more affluent suburban locations in New Hampshire. And I recall back in 2008 that we were more closely involved with Barack Obama's campaign, and our modeling there in that campaign, that we had projected that Barack Obama, he was a senator from Illinois, would win in Iowa. In fact, he did. But also that he would lose in New Hampshire. And, of course, the reason there was that New Hampshire, particularly the rural parts of New Hampshire, there was a lot of people that were involved in racism, and the monster ran a racist campaign. But she also ran a middle-of-the-road type campaign, appealed to New Hampshire there. But she did not win out in the long haul against Barack Obama. But we have a different situation this political campaign in 2020, in that we have these billionaires in there. Barack Obama did not have to deal with those that are self-funding. We've had a lot of people to do some self-funding. DJ Trump did some at one time. His draw was more a lot of free TV that he was able to get. But at the same time, the same route is there. You have a quote-unquote non-politician in one. This is in Tom Steyer, that used to be the hedge fund type. But in Bloomberg has been in politics before. It was mayor of New York City, and he's known as Stop and Frisk Bloomberg. But this time around, he's went to places like the historic Greenwood section of Tulsa, which was burned down by white supremacists in of the 20s, and talked about his green plan there for that Greenwood plan, he calls it, and he has moved there. But the story, I think, of this election is, we'll look ahead a little bit to South Carolina while we're on this thing, is Tom Steyer. Tom Steyer is at 18. I think he may be at 19% in South Carolina. Very interesting how he's been able to put that coalition together. So from all indications, once they depart New Hampshire on Tuesday night, they'll go on to Nevada and to South Carolina. The race itself changes. And the big question, many of these pundits and various other characters about what will happen to the race. Because Bernie has run the race before, he'll be fine. Little Petey, we wonder about where he will be in the scheme of things, because on March 3rd, Bloomberg's big machine so far has spent $100 million, will appear, and is appearing at this particular time. And he'll be running those double-digit numbers also. So it will be an interesting situation where these people will be able to go from New Hampshire onward. So we go now to Carl Robe. We usually have him on the week that was. Incidentally, you can find us where you get your internet radio or podcast, whether it be at iHeart or YouTube. Our audio edition is there. On Twitter, you can find us there. You can find us on Facebook on the Boston Red / Boston Red Network. And any of those destinations, the Google operation. Also, you can find us. You can find us on Stitcher, a mobile platform. We do well there. And on streaker. Another one that we are there. They aggregate some of our shows across these many other networks, too numerous to name, quite literally. And we can also be at the Internet Archives. There are just numerous ways that you can find us. We have been not doing the best job of placing us where we should be. We're updating bostonred.org. We have some of the players there. We'll get the Google player there and some other ways that you can find us on these social media platforms so we can get the news out to you. And we attempt to present different points of views. We are not pluralistic here, but we do have a Carl Robe. We have the University of Virginia, that's Larry Sabato's shop, the Crystal Ball. We always pay homage there. They have a hire. And we have our own Ouija board model that we bring out here, and several other models in the economic sphere. Incidentally, Numbers Man will appear this weekend, along with the Open Source Report, where we'll be talking about the open source and voting. Anyway, let's get to Uncle Carl. He's writing in the Wall Street Journal as normal. Lee, on the 6th of February, 2020. Hey, Democrats, you got trouble? Well, there's no doubt about that. They do have trouble. And we have to look at the history of the Iowa Democratic Party. Barack Obama had to literally rebuild the party. The party was in tough shape at the time, and it's gotten back to be in a tough shape. However, they've had some success there with the governor there in Iowa, but you still have some of the old forces around there. Monday night's tabulation meltdown at the Iowa caucuses was an utter and unmitigated disaster. Couldn't have said it any better. The incompetence was jaw-dropping. Iowa Democratic Party leaders reportedly didn't train the 1,800 precinct captains how to use the app that they promised would speed up the count of voters and provide more transparency. It did not provide transparency. It didn't speed anything up. The whole procedure was dodgy. They didn't run a full-scale test in which captains all sent full data sets from their caucus sites in the same hour, nor did they test the backup phone system to confirm it can handle the hundreds of simultaneous calls, and they had been warned there were problems, no doubt about that. After this debacle, the only way Iowa could keep its privileged status in the presidential selection process is the responsibility of state Democratic Party leaders admitted Harikari. Even then, it might not be enough. How angry must Democratic candidates be about the time, money, and effort they threw into Iowa, only to see it end in this indecisive mess? What about the volunteers who sacrificed months for someone they believed in? Well, no doubt about that on a quote-unquote a personal level. It doesn't help that as of Wednesday evening, the results were still muddled. They're still muddled today, and this is on Saturday. The first place finisher will get a smaller percentage of the vote in Iowa than any previous caucus winner. There's only 41 votes pledged there. Out of more than 3,000 at the national convention, could be split among a record 5 candidates. Bernie Sanders was trailing Buttigieg in state delegates equivalents. That's a fancy term for each candidate's share of the state convention. Now that is by 1/10. Bernie has leads in the voting, both first and second choice. We at Cranston Analytics projected Bernie Sanders as a winner of the Iowa. The EP, another big projection machine, has not just too close to call there, and they may never have one. But with likely ending up with 13 national pledged delegates from Iowa, they still lead the field by beating expectations. Buttigieg has picked up a little bit of momentum. Well, more than a little bit. We'll get to it in a minute. And now on to the former mayor, Bloomberg. Had a good night by avoiding the fray entirely. If Bloomberg, who isn't competing in the early states, has any shot at nomination, then Joe Biden's campaign must collapse before Super Tuesday. Biden was expected to win Iowa, but is running a dismal fourth. Hertz, well, there's no place really for Biden to go. Elizabeth Warren has a very good organization in Iowa, and we expected Elizabeth Warren to be on what the journalist Yeltsin used to be there with the Iowa paper there in Des Moines. Used to say the 3 seats out of Iowa. Now there are 5. And Joe Lunchbox Biden is projected to do well in New Hampshire, Iowa. He said that his poor Iowa performance raises the stakes for Nevada and South Carolina. We'll go into that in a minute. Contest later in the month, and if the former vice president does badly there, especially if he loses the Pimento State, then his camp. Watch to see if Biden's poor showing in Iowa dents his national polling as the most electable Democrat. It has not yet, and we'll look at some of that polling in a minute here. Another winner was DJ Trump. The bigger the Iowa mess, the worse the Democratic field looked. That sink won't last, but stink, excuse me. But Trump is also coming off several weeks of mostly good news. He signed U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. The Chinese approved the first phase. Of course, then we ended up with the coronavirus. Anyway, his surprise Super Bowl ad highlighting criminal justice reform in an emotional, personal way on several Democratic operatives, attending an electoral play for not only African Americans but also dissatisfied suburbanites. Now, this is interesting that he would bring up criminal justice reform as one of the items, but we have to look back on the Koch brothers, because one is dead now, that one of their, this is a libertarian gang, the Koch brothers, formerly out of Wichita, Kansas, and now in Palm Springs, and also in Palm Beach, Florida. Well, I think Palm, I'm not sure which one. The one's dead. Was he in Palm Beach, Florida, in California? Anyway, as this column forecast, because Democrats refuse to take up the patient work of persuasion. Now, this is the impeachment situation. Instead, bungled and insulted the jury. The process will cost Democrats amongst independent voters, so is a wishful thinking here. The president also keeps getting good news on the economy, and we'll talk about that on numbers, man. This weekend it plugs along in a decent pace with unemployment at a 50-year low. More vacant jobs than job seekers. Well, that is kind of a fractious question in that, yes, there are jobs there, but the job seekers, for the most part, for those jobs are not qualified. Wages for workers rising faster than for managers. Yeah, but the problem is the workers were so far behind. Anyway, this article is here, and we put it on our Twitter feed out there. Basically, Uncle Carl, let's look at the... we'll look at some polling now, because we want to move on here and just go with these numbers. We have Emerson polling, which has out Boston, across from the Common. They have a tracking poll, and we have Suffolk University... Their poll also out there. We'll take a look very quickly at those. This is today's polling. New Hampshire Democratic primary. This is the Boston Globe, and Suffolk University has Buttigieg ahead by 1 point. Bernie Sanders at 24. He's at 25. Liz Warren is at 14. Lunchbox Biden is at 11 in this poll, and Amy Klobuchar at 6. Now, in the WHDH poll, this is Emerson's polling here. Bernie is ahead by 7, 31 to 24 with Little Petey. And Liz Warren is at 11, Bernie is at 11, and Amy Klobuchar is at 9. Now, on Friday, we have another New Hampshire poll here. This is NBC News. Marcia's poll here has Bernie ahead by 4, 25 to 21 over Little Petey. And once again, Elizabeth Warren is at 14. Joe Lunchbox Biden at 13, Amy Klobuchar at 8. That was on Friday. The Boston Globe poll had Bernie ahead 24-23 over Buttigieg. They basically traded places, and Liz Warren was at 13, Joe Biden at 11, and Amy Klobuchar at 6. The Emerson poll on Friday had Bernie ahead by 9, 32-23 over Little Petey. And once again, Warren was at 13, Biden at 11, Amy Klobuchar was at 9. She was incidentally at 9. She's at 9 today also. So she's closing in on Biden, 9 and 11, getting very, very close. So what we'll say is these three people are bunched up together. It'd be an interesting situation there. Now we'll go back to Thursday. The NBC poll has Bernie ahead by 4. So it's getting to be a very, very close race. The Monmouth poll out of Jersey has Bernie also at 20. That was on a Thursday, and Buttigieg at 24. Warren at 13. Biden ahead by 17. Amy Klobuchar at 10. The Globe poll had Bernie ahead on Thursday by 6. Buttigieg at 19. Again, Warren at 11, 12. And Amy was down. Amy is moving up. She was at 6. The Emerson poll has, it's on Thursday the 6th, had Bernie at 31 and Buttigieg at 21. Liz Warren at 12. Biden at 12. And Amy at 11. So in other words, they were literally all together in that particular poll. And if we go to South Carolina, this is East Carolina University here. Bernie is at 13. This is where Tom Steyer is at 19. Above Bernie Sanders at 14. Warren at 8. Buttigieg at only 4 there. He's not doing much in South Carolina. In North Carolina, we hear from PPP again once. And there, Biden is ahead by 9. And then we come with Sanders. Bloomberg's at 14. Warren's at 12, Little Petey's at 5, and Amy Klobuchar is at 4 in North Carolina. Won't see very many North Carolina polls here. And on Monday, the Boston Globe poll had Bernie ahead by 9 over Little Petey, and Warren was at 15. Joe Lunchbox 10. Joe Lunchbox Biden at 15. Amy was at only 6. The Emerson poll was a little better there. Bernie was ahead by 15 in that poll. Buttigieg at 17. He was at 32. Liz Warren at 11. Biden at 13. Amy Klobuchar also was tied with Liz Warren. And then if we get to the national nomination, Biden's ahead by 5. Then comes Bernie Sanders at 19. Liz Warren at 18. Bloomberg at 9. Little Petey at 9, and Amy Klobuchar there. And we look at some approval ratings here. The Reuters Ipsos had him at 42, and YouGov at 44. And the generic ballot had Democrats ahead by 7. Now let's take a look here at, I believe this is the Gallup poll here. Sure, we'll get it up, but this is the one that DJ Trump actually finally got to 49 in that poll, the highest he's been with the Gallup organization, period. So that is that part of it, and look at a little bit at the Emerson poll here. Won't spend very much time on it. This is a tracking poll, incidentally. Continues to lead as Buttigieg inches closer. Now, this is day 6 of a 7 News Emerson poll, tracking poll here at Emerson College. Bernie holds the lead with 31, and we already talked about that. Amy Klobuchar is 9, Nova candidates above 5. The margin of error here is 4.3. It's always high in these tracking polls, period. Sanders lost 1 point. Buttigieg has gained 1 point for an overall 11-point increase since the first tracking poll 5 days ago. Liz Warren lost 2 points. Biden and Klobuchar held their supporters. Biden needs to hold his supporters here. Respondents asked if they would definitely vote for their preferred candidate. or if there was a chance that they could change their mind, 63% they would definitely vote for their candidate. Sanders supporters are more committed at 90%, so they will definitely vote for him. Of the top candidates, 64% support Joe Lunchbox Biden, 63% support Liz Warren, and 47% are committed to Little Petey. From Dr. Kimball, he's director of the Emerson College Polling, explains many voters are still on the fence on who they will support, but this does not include Sanders supporters, which means the other candidates won't be able to pull any of his votes, which leaves them fighting amongst themselves. Continuing the trend found in past polls, tracking polls, Sanders polls very strong support from younger voters. Amongst the voters under 50 years old, he leads with 44% support, followed by Little Petey with 17, Liz Warren with 13 amongst 50 and over. Buttigieg, and this is kind of interesting here, leads with 31%, followed by Bernie with 20 and Joe Lunchbox Biden at 17, Warren at 14. Bernie holds a lead amongst very liberal voters. This is what we talked about earlier with the large number of independents in New Hampshire that are not liberal. Following Sanders, very liberal voters is Warren, 24. Buttigieg, and this is the true essence of his campaign, only 12%. Amongst somewhat liberal, Sanders leading 43%, followed by Buttigieg with 22%, Warren with 11%, and Joe Biden with 9%. Amongst moderate or conservative voters, Buttigieg holds the lead, 29%. Following him is Biden with 15%, and then it's pretty much bunched up together here. Sanders at 14%, Amy Klobuchar at 13%. In the 1st Congressional District, 36% of the voters support Bernie Sanders, followed by 21% for Little Petey, 12% for Joe Lunchbox Biden, and 11% for Liz Warren. In the 2nd District, 26% support Bernie, 12% support Buttigieg, and Warren, and 11% Biden. Pretty much those voters were frequently asked to pick a candidate regardless of who they're going to vote for whom they expect to be the Democratic nominee. Bernie leads at 42%, followed by Buttigieg, Biden at 19%, and Bloomberg at 7% here, since yesterday has decreased his question by 3 points. Sanders has gained 1. Buttigieg held his supporters, and Bloomberg held 3. The elephant in the room. Majority 62% said they are more enthusiastic. 11% said they are less. 13%, are less, and 12% said they feel about the same level of enthusiasm. That was a big question out of Iowa. Additional respondents were asked whether having a woman on the ballot would make them more or less likely to support that ticket. 26% said it would make them more likely. 3% said it less likely. 71% said it did not matter. They were asked the same question in regard to having African American Latino on the ticket. 14% said they would make them more likely. 4% less likely. And 82% said it didn't matter here, but they could be lying. It was conducted the 6th through the 7th of February. And let's see, N equals 500 with a credibility interval similar to the margin of error at a plus or minus 4.3%. Data was collecting using interactive voice response system of landlines only at N equals 332, mobile phones N equals 99, and online panels provided by M-Trunk at 68. You'll see more and more of that appearing out here. So we'll skip away from that, and let's go over to the, where do we want to go here? We'll go to the debate. This is on the LA Times. We move from these, and we will move on to Monday Morning Quarterback. We'll get some more locally focused stuff. We'll go to the People's World. This is a takeaway of the Democratic presidential debate. It was not carried by some of the same channels that it normally was carried. This is Manchester, muddled in Iowa, came up the Marsh of Manchester. Several candidates met, took to the stage. The results was a lively, often combative 2.5-hour session. We'll try to get a little bit of that. The Granite State here, a picture of a little Petey, Joe Biden kind of bending down to, and Bernie just standing there. The former mayor of South Bend came into debate only with a burst of momentum momentum from his strong showing in Iowa, and then struck into a pack of a pack of rivals eager to cut the 38 years old down. Tom Steyer, he of no government experience, said he was worried about Buttigieg's lack of experience. Amy Klobuchar derived him as a cool newcomer, the cool part ripped with condensation, who was taking cheap shots at Washington. Joe Lunchbox Biden dismissed Buttigieg's youth and said in essence, what's wrong with the old days of Obama and Biden? I don't know what about the past. Barack Obama and Joe Biden was so bad, the former vice president said, no doubt mindful of his former front-running made and continued great popularity, no doubt, in the Democratic Party. Buttigieg managed to keep yes in his cool and delivered appointed taunting the outside the beltway credentials. Well, that has been done in American politics by D.J. Trump and by various others. Bill Clinton taunted that as being outside the beltway. He was a governor, not a mayor of a little one-horse town. If you're looking for a person with the most Washington experience under your belt, he responded, you've got your candidate and it's not me. Well, no doubt about that, but that can cause also problems. Biden stepped up after humbling fourth place finish in Iowa. Biden greatly improved his performance in New Hampshire to keep his campaign on track. Well, he changed some personnel also. I took a hit in Iowa, and I probably will take a hit here, he said in the first moments of the debate, noting that two candidates, Senator Warren of the Commonwealth, Massachusetts, and Bernie Sanders, have an advantage coming out of neighboring states, no doubt about that. And he faulted Bernie for not talking about Medicare for all. It didn't come up very much in this debate, saying that Buttigieg was too young. Well, I wouldn't harp much on that. He is younger than other candidates. John F. Kennedy, at his time, and again, this was a different time in the 60s, was a younger candidate than most. But he projected that, and of course, Richard Nixon at the time was not that old. They were familiar lines of attack. Passion, bolstering of his decade-long political career, Biden said all but shouted with no small amount of hyperbole, I've been part of every major initiative, no doubt about that, when he used to go to cinemas there in Delaware, and they would challenge apartheid there. And he's been out there, Bernie has been out there, years of experience. Close your eyes and listen closely. The sound could have been Bernie speaking in 2016 as one of the umpteen events he's held since then. The message, a large part of the appeal to supporters who find residence in the repetitious bashing of millionaires and vowed to chase the money class from their perch. Iowa caucus showed the limit of that appeal, though Sanders ran strong amongst voters who supported him 4 years ago. He did poorly amongst new caucus goes, those who backed his opponent, of course, Hillary Monster Clinton. Incidentally, Little Petey and Biden are getting the monster vote. On Friday, Bernie didn't offer a whole lot new to attract, to converts or lure fresh supporters. One of the many characteristic moments, he brought a discussion of electability to two staples of his economic populist program. The way you bring people together is to make it clear that we are not going to give tax breaks to billionaires, large corporations. He roared. Period. And I'll tell you something. He went on. The way you bring people together is by ending the international disgrace of this country and being the only major nation on earth not to guarantee health care for all people as a human right. Now, in the last primary, he won 61% of New Hampshire vote 4 years ago against Clinton. The calculation seems to be that a rock-solid base, roughly 20 to 30% of the electorate, may be enough to drive on Tuesday night. It will, but the American people have a propensity to go for something new and being deceived. Now, if you are dealing with a more conservative audience, which you are in New Hampshire, than even in Iowa, because basically most of the conservatives in Iowa are in the Republican Party. So that is a difference. But you have a lot of middle-of-the-roaders uncommitted, as we do in the Commonwealth down in Boston. But the situation is that as far as the conflict between Liz Warren and Bernie Sanders, the handshake and all that, that is past them. They moved on. And even though George Stephanopoulos tried to get into the act, and basically they've been friends for a very long time and agree on some issues, disagree on others. Several on the stage took turns plummeting Little Petey. The Mass senator stood by silently when the discussion turned heated on health care. She chimed in, "We need to bring the most help to the most people as quickly as we can." She spoke with strengthening the Affordable Care Act, same as Amy Klobuchar did. As the debate wore on, she turned more aggressive in declaring there is no place for billionaires like Bloomberg, and criticized unnamed others who suck up. That was Little Petey when he was challenged about the racial disparities and arrests for marijuana positions that was in Little South Bend. He, after lengthy respondents, Warren asked if he had given a substantial answer. "No," she said. "You have to own up to the facts." And one of the problems Little Petey had, and not his questioning by his opponents on stage, but by the news media, and we at this mic had noted Little Petey has problems answering questions from the news media, which could be his downfall, because as he moves up in the polls, there will be more problems with the media trying to take him down. The exchange was filled with harsher and more direct attacks. Candidates were on the edge, more passionate, and more in a hurry to get their word out. The debate was far too long, but it wasn't a snoozer the candidates put on last month in Iowa. There were also light moments as Biden hugged Sanders after moderator brought up a recent comment by Clinton, but no one likes or wants to work with him. So the monster did get into the deal, period. Buttigieg said firmly, this is not about Hunter Biden or Vice President Biden or anybody. This is about abuse of power by the president. He put that in there. Dodgy Biden did get up. This is Mike Barabak. Covers state and national politics for the LA Times, based in the Bay Area. These are two national politics for the Times. She returned to the Washington Bureau in 2018 after spending 8 years covering politics and Congress for the Wall Street Journal. Her first stint was with the Times, 1995 to 2010, covering Congress. She's a native of Long Island, a graduate of Harvard. She has lived in the Washington area since 1980, except for one blissful year in Palo Alto on a night fellowship professional journalist. So we kind of get the view of who is writing these. Let me just look at our time here. Our time is running past us. We'll save Jane Fonda until the next time around. Pardon the pun here. And let me just quickly jump over here to... I'm not sure where we are with the Washington Post here. We'll see. Okay. Democrats crash over electability and policy in blistering a debate. This is their coverage of what happened in Manchester, New Hampshire. Yeah, this is Manchester, and the Democratic Party entered a more combustible phase on Monday as candidates attacked each other on the stage with blistering policy critiques and arguments over who was best positioned to beat DJ Trump. With no clear front runner from Iowa, the debate stage became a free-fire zone, and the candidates seizing the moment to call out each other. They harped on age and political records, flashed anger and indignation, and warning their rivals' policy descriptions would fail. Multiple candidates cautioned that the polling leader, Bernie Sanders of Vermont, would not be electable given his identification as a Democratic socialist. In signs of reordering the Democratic primary, it was Sanders and former Mayor Petey who often took control of the stage, engaging in impassioned monologues, seeing their records scrutinized while rivals raised their hands in hopes of being called on next. Former VP Biden and Liz Warren entered the evening looking to break out of their sudden second-tier status as the billionaire former mayor. Bloomberg waits in the wing. He was not on stage. One of the most poignant pairings. Buttigieg attacked Biden's longevity in politics. Well, he can't help that, suggesting that the party should not fall back on the familiar and urged voters to finally allow us to leave the politics of the past in the past. Politics of the past were not all that bad. Biden 77 interjected, pointing towards a measure on violence against women, armed control, and other legislation. I don't know what about the past of Barack and Joe Biden was so bad. Buttigieg also turned towards Sanders, saying a nominee can't be someone dividing people with politics that say if you don't go the way all the way to the edge, doesn't count. Well, DJ Trump's made a career out of this, and he's doing quite well, thank you, at 49% in the polls. Politics should be one addition and an inclusion and a belonging, he said, and no one beats the people over the head and say they shouldn't ever be on our side if they don't agree 100% with us. Asked if he was referring to Sanders, Buttigieg said he was referring to Bernie. I never said that, Sanders responded. But let me tell you what I do say. The way you bring people together is by presenting an agenda that works for working people of this country, not the billionaire class. And of course one billionaire was not there. It's a funny thing, Sanders said there are millions of people who can desire to run for office, but I guess if you're worth $60 billion or you can spend several hundred million on commercials, you have a slight advantage. This is nonsense. Amy Klobuchar agreed. I don't think people look at the guy in the White House and say, we need someone richer. Biden was more pointed with his rivals than in the past debates, but he seemed to struggle at times to get his message across, while Warren kept her answers focused. She always does. On the message she delivered for months, Amy Klobuchar at 59 had her strongest debate showing so far, and she needed to have that. It'd be interesting to see where she lands in New Hampshire. A lot of independents there. Her name recognition is not as much as Little Petey out of Iowa, but Little Petey is the man from Facebook. But Amy Klobuchar is beginning to connect. How well she will be able to connect in New Hampshire. And as she goes on to Nevada and into South Carolina, Tom Steyer has staked out South Carolina in double digits. Joe Biden is trying to hold on to South Carolina with the followers of O.J. Simpson there. Bernie is making some with that, so it'll be a mixed thing. South Carolina is not Little Petey's playing field. Little Petey has to be preparing now to run on Super Tuesday. Now that's going to be a mixed situation there because of where the money is. Klobuchar went up against both Sanders and in another chapter in the ongoing dispute with Buttigieg. She should spend her time with Buttigieg. That's a mistake to spend her time with Bernie. Bernie will get his vote, and so will Liz Warren. Buttigieg is the one that's more standing in her way, and it's a rehearsal for her to deal with Bloomberg. She reminded Buttigieg of a line he used regularly in Iowa during the impeachment trial, in which he called the proceeding exhaustive, enough to make him want to change the channel and watch cartoons. Well, no doubt he does watch cartoons. He looks a little cartoonish, according to DJ Trump. After a lively and robust start, however, the candidates also tried to show some form of unity. Buttigieg even defended, or some would say pandered to Biden, saying Democrats should not worry about Republican threats to investigate his son, by indirect reference to Dodgy Biden. And of course the hug here, famous there, that was on the Hillary Clinton thing. Hillary Clinton's people no doubt support Buttigieg in this situation. They did support Biden, but as Biden gets into a little trouble, even Sanders, who won more popular votes in Iowa caucus than any other candidate, admits that the turnout in the state did not reach the levels, no doubt, of 2008. There was not much excitement. Also, one has to realize that Iowa has grown more conservative since 2008. 2008, many years in the past. There, as we prepared, and we left downstate Illinois, the old state capital, and Barack Obama's campaign to the White House, until he rode Mr. Lincoln's train from Philadelphia in there, was a different era. A lot of excitement going on there. And the excitement around Barack Obama was Barack Obama being Barack Obama. He was the man identified with the followers of O.J. Simpson. There's no debating that question. He put racism front and center. Now, he did not end racism. It was not a transitional period. It just showed how divided the American people were and how they could be divided. And later, a man out of Jamaica Plains, Queens, named DJ Trump, was able to exploit that. And you got to remember, DJ was in the Bircher movement. He was pushing that scam. Then he went to the high school transcript. But he was very active, and he had appeared before in the Central Park 5. So he knew how to cultivate the right wing, tapping into the conspiracy theories. That's why in our poll, the Ouija board poll, we do not include conspiracy theories in there, and several others. So we're going to always show DJ Trump a little bit, our model, up than he would in some other polls. But we believe when it's all finished and done, we'll get an accurate situation there. And being the reason we called Iowa for Bernard Sanders of Vermont. Now, in New Hampshire, and let me just sum this up, we're running out of time here, it is a more conservative state. You have more conservative leaners there in the so-called independents and on the line. We have them in Boston also. These non-aligned characters. This has basically prevented a woman from being elected governor of the Commonwealth. Period. And this is a sad situation there, that we've not been able to elect a woman, but we did elect Elizabeth Warren, and Elizabeth Warren beat Downtown Brown, kicked him in the ass, and she was reelected. So she is a proven campaigner, and on our list, she is still second to Bernie, and third is Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. Now, Amy Klobuchar is a progressive, but models her campaign a little bit different, but all do. And Little Petey is not on our list, so we can forget about Little Petey. Little Petey is just a cartoonish character that came off of a Saturday morning show, period. And this goes on to talk about Anita Dunn here, that he spent, this is Joe Biden, his home in Wilmington, Delaware, where he lives, preparing for the debate, meeting with advisors, and restructuring his campaign. He needs to do that to calm skittish donors. That's the most important thing about Biden. He's not really had the money to properly move forward with. And Little Petey has been grabbing the big-time money to keep afloat. But even grabbing the big-time money is not going to help him out, and help him when he goes up against a Bloomberg. His opponents have cast him as naive. We have a newcomer in the White House right now, and look where It's got us. That's an Amy Klobuchar. Well, Amy Klobuchar, I think having some experience is a good thing. And Andrew Yang, he's almost non-existent there. Drew oversized crowds. His economic confused message has limited time left to make an appeal. Let me say, America, it's great to be back on the debate stage. He's 44 years old, referring to missing the qualification in the previous debate. He is there. Bernie, while you were representing your constituents, an awful lot of people in California, New York, and Pennsylvania, they were getting killed by thousands during the same period, Biden said. Well, again, they move on. The candidates squabble over their past records, comments from surrogates focusing on the black electorate. They'll be, of course, dominated on the 29th. That's before March the 3rd of February. That's in South Carolina. And Tom Steyer, now he's coming up in South Carolina. Biden to apologize for what he and some supporters consider to be racist comments by one of Biden's top supporters in South Carolina. Biden said his supporter, Senator Dick Hartnell, was sorry, but then Biden urged Bernie to answer comments made in South Carolina paper by one of his supporters made about his history on matters. Joe Biden is a friend of mine, and I'm not here to attack him, Bernie said. Buttigieg, who struggled to support, well, he can forget that. Particularly increased arrest of African Americans for marijuana possession. One thing to remember about South Bend, I've been there a few times. It hasn't been of recent times, but it's a typical Indiana small town. The only difference is it has Notre Dame University there, but it's still very parochial. It's not a town that is that welcoming of African Americans or followers of O.J. Simpson. So all the things that need to be changed in order to prevent violence and remove the effects of systematic racism, not just in criminal justice system, but from our economy, from healthcare, etc. And Elizabeth Warren was asked, was the answer by Little Petey substantial enough? No, she said, you have to own up to the facts. And the facts of the matter is that South Bend is not paradise land. It's a small town, and it has all the virtues of small towns around that sector. And basically speaking, it is outside the university community, a fairly racist town. Not as overt as some others, but again, one has to understand that in the 20s, the highest membership of the Ku Klux Klan was in Indiana. So there are progressive pockets of Indiana, regressive pockets of Indiana there, so we have to look at all of those. So when we get a 38-year-old little opportunist from Indiana, you have to closely scrutinize. I'm not saying that Buttigieg is a racist, no, but he's a corporate mouthpiece. There's no doubt about this. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin Memorial Broadcast Booth on the 8th of February, 2020. See you on this side on the Monday Morning Quarterback. We'll also have a special production on Iowa on the political channel Boston Red, and also talk about open source election software and the debacle in Iowa on the open source report, which is coming this weekend. And we have numbers, man. We'll talk about the new numbers, where they are, and where the economy is, consumer confidence, and all the nice variables. Good day. Have a good weekend, everyone.